Hey everyone, welcome to day 3 of our James Bible study. Before we get into chapter 3, I want to tell you about how we're going to continue these daily Bible studies moving forward after this week. These daily Bible studies have been amazing for me. I hope you've enjoyed them. This is the final week that we're going to do these Bible studies in this format. For next week and beyond, from April to July, we're going to continue to offer daily Bible studies in the form of discipleship groups. So, if you're interested, here is what this will look like. We're going to take interested individuals and place them into discipleship groups of 4 to 6 men or women. Each group will be either men's only or women's only. And each group will meet weekly via video conferencing. And by the way, we'll teach you how to do that if you've never done it before. Each group will meet weekly, and in each group meeting, you will discuss what you have studied throughout the week. You see, we're going to continue to assign you portions of Scripture to read each day, just like we've done in these daily Bible studies. To start out, each group will be studying the Gospel of John. So each day, Monday through Friday, you'll study one chapter in the book of John, and you'll take notes on it, and you'll answer the 6 questions. That gives you Saturday and Sunday to catch up if you need to. So 5 days a week, you have these readings and notes to take. Then, once a week, you'll get together with your group via video chat, and you'll discuss what you've studied, what stood out to you, what was helpful to you. In addition, you'll have some opportunities to share prayer requests with each other, to get to know one another better, and to talk about life and spiritual growth. What's going well in your life, what's not going well, and how you can serve God more faithfully in the situation that He's called you to. Now, while this plan has a lot in common with the video studies, there's obviously some significant differences, right? These video Bible studies have been pretty low commitment. Like, you do them if you feel like it, and if you don't, and no one's going to come asking questions about your life, right? So this plan, this new plan, this discipleship group plan raises the stakes a bit, right? It is more costly for you. There's increased accountability. There's increased intentionality here. But please hear this. While the cost is higher, so is the reward. I have been a part of an intentional men's discipleship group for the last 7 months, and it is by far the best thing I've done all year. It's probably the best thing I've done for the last 3 years, spiritually for me. I genuinely believe that if you say yes to this discipleship group and you commit to them, then you will see spiritual growth like you haven't seen in a long time in your life. Now, you probably have some more time on your hands right now, so let me suggest that this could be a really good use of your time. If you're interested, please let me know. I know this is quick, but we'd like to get these groups up and running by next week, if possible. So take a few days if you need to, but please let me know by this weekend if you're interested. All right, we are in the process of finalizing our group leaders, so we don't yet know how many groups we will have. And so it's possible that we will have to put a cap on these groups on a first-come, first-served basis. So please let me know if you're interested. All right. If you let me know that you're interested, I will send you one more video telling you tell you more about these groups and what to expect. This video right here, this introduction, it's kind of like a interest meeting, just giving you basic facts. The next video will paint a clearer picture of what these groups will be like for those who are interested. If after watching the second video you're still interested, we're going to plug you into a group. All right. Thanks, y'all. Now on to the study of the book of James. Obviously, my explanation today will be a little bit shorter, given that I've just spent a few minutes explaining the new discipleship groups. In James chapter 3, I first circled the word teachers. Sometimes I forget that this entire section of James 3, 1 through 12, where James warns against the tongue, is set in the context of teachers. The fact that the tongue is such a world of evil and so untamable, that should make us all more wary of becoming a teacher, a spiritual teacher. Because teachers use their tongues a lot in teaching. Now, this section is applicable to all Christians, but especially to teachers. One Bible study principle that I've covered in the book of Philippians was the principle of cross-referencing. When you read a verse or passage, it makes you think of another verse or passage, pause, and go search that other verse or passage and compare notes. For example, James 3:2 sounds a lot like a verse I read yesterday, 1 John 1:8. If we say we have no sin, we deceive ourselves, and the truth is not in us. So, having read James 3:2, I wrote in the margins CF, which is the abbreviation which means compare. I wrote CF 1 John 1:8. All right. Another principle for Bible study that I've taught is the usefulness of making lists. I made a list of all the analogies that James uses in this section to demonstrate the power and potential destructiveness of the tongue. It's like a bit in the mouths of horses, verse 3. It's like a ship's rudder, verse 4. All right, it's like a small spark that creates a forest fire, verse 5. It's like an untamable beast, verse 6. It's like a deadly poison, also verse 6. Making a list sometimes adds to the impact to the reader. Making a list of all these analogies can help you, for example, to stop and consider just how powerful and potentially destructive your tongue can be. I also used a cross-reference in this section by remembering what James told us in chapter 1. In James chapter 1, verses 19 through 20, he exhorted his readers to be quick to hear, slow to speak, and slow to anger. So those two earlier verses, for me at least, become much weightier in light of James's teaching in chapter 3. The tongue is a deadly poison, an untamable beast, a spark that can easily create a forest fire. When I think about what James says in chapter 3, and when I think about how often that's been true in my life, that really makes me want to even more heed James's advice in chapter 1. Let me be quick to listen, slow to speak. Okay, verse 8 gives us an opportunity to discuss a new principle that I haven't covered yet, but it is so important. Here's the new principle. Always read biblical commands in light of the gospel. Always read biblical commands or biblical law in light of the gospel. Biblical commands, such as the commands here to guard your tongue, these are good commands, right? We need to read them, we need to take them seriously, and we need to apply them. But as we seek to apply these commands, we need to always remember the gospel of grace, which reminds us you can't actually do this. Verse 8 is a perfect example of that. After taking 7 verses warning us of the danger of the tongue and exhorting us to tame the tongue, then James he gives it away in verse 8. You can't actually tame the tongue. No human being can tame the tongue, right? The law or biblical command in this section says tame the tongue. The gospel says you can't tame your tongue. And that's why Jesus Christ had to die for you. So when you become convicted as you read this of all the ways you haven't tamed your tongue, or as you try to put this into practice today with your family and you fail, remember the gospel. You aren't saved by your obedience. You are saved by the obedience of Jesus Christ. And Jesus Christ never once in 33 years misused his tongue. And he was a teacher, right, who was constantly speaking and was confronted by all manners of evil and stupidity and hard-heartedness, right? You think you have a good reason to get angry? Think about what it was like for Jesus when dealing with Pharisees and disciples who simply couldn't understand the basic things that Jesus was teaching them, and yet he never once sinned. And it's because of Jesus' perfection that you're saved. So when you read biblical commands, you need to take those commands seriously and put it into practice. But as you follow the command, do it knowing that you will inevitably break it in some form or another, and Jesus will be right there to pick you up and move you forward. Now, that's not a reason to take holiness less seriously, as if, well, I'm going to sin anyway, so I might as well do it. It's not fatalism. No. Reading biblical commands in light of the gospel actually gives you more motivations to keep trying, to not give up when you discover that you're more wicked and more sinful than you thought you were. We need to remember the gospel of grace every day. So, read biblical commands in light of the gospel. All right, verses 13 through 18, we have another section here. We have a section here focused on wisdom. This is another opportunity to make a list. I made a list in 2 columns in the margin of my Bible. I wrote the heading of one column, wisdom from above, and on the other column, wisdom from below. Then I went through and I wrote every description that fits under each of those columns. It's a pretty powerful exercise. If you haven't already done this, I would encourage you to do it now. Okay, on to the questions. I already told you the answer to question 1, what did I mark in my Bibles? Question 2, what is my summary of the section? Here it is. James warns his readers, and especially the teachers in the church, to be wary of the dangers of the tongue, using vivid imagery to make his point. He always wants his readers to see that true wisdom, he also wants his readers to see that true wisdom is from God, and is one that brings peace, gentleness, and unity, as opposed to worldly wisdom, which brings jealousy and strife and division. Question 3, what does this tell us about God? God is holy. He cares about how we speak. God is a judge. Verse 1, God judges us for how we speak, among other things. God cares about our integrity. He's not okay with hypocrisy. It's not okay for us to worship God on Sundays or during our quiet times and then to go forward and spew out gossip and lies. God is gracious. Even though we can't be perfect or tame the tongue, there is still hope. All right, question 4, how does this passage encourage you? I was encouraged by the thoughts of the gospel, given my earlier comments about reading the biblical commands in light of the gospel. But I was also encouraged by the unity and harmony that we should strive for as Christians. Verses 13 through 18 teach us that we're to be wise as Christians, that if we are wise as Christians, we'll be unified. We'll care for one another and be gentle. All right? Isolation makes me long for my church family. So any passage that reminds me of the unity and harmony of the body of Christ will always encourage me in this phase. Question 5, how does this passage challenge you? Well, I can always be more careful in how I speak about others behind their back. This was a good, sobering prompting for me to be more careful how I talk about others. Gossip is a sin that God doesn't take lightly, and so I can't either. Question 6, how will I respond to this? With the thoughts about godly wisdom, bringing peace and mercy, that reminds me to reach out to a fellow believer that I haven't reached out to in a while, so I'm planning on sending a message today. Okay, that's it. Thanks for continuing to do this. For tomorrow, read James 4 and mark in your Bibles and answer the questions. Again, if you're interested in being a part of one of these men's or women's discipleship groups, please contact me. If you want to take a day or two to pray about it, that's perfectly fine. But we are trying to put these groups together for this weekend to be up and running by next week. So please tell me as soon as you can. Thanks. See you tomorrow.